The night was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that made the city streets feel heavier than they were. The street lamps flickered, throwing weak halos of yellow light over the sidewalks, where shadows stretched long and uncertain. It was nearly midnight, and most people were home asleep, tucked safely into warm beds. Daniel Morgan, a man who was both admired and envied in the city, guided his sleek black car slowly through the narrow road that ran past a cluster of old shops and closed cafes. On the outside, he was the picture of success. A millionaire entrepreneur, tall, broad-shouldered, with a commanding presence that could silence a room. But tonight, his sharp features were softened by fatigue, and the only light in his dark eyes was reflected from the tiny girl sleeping peacefully in the back seat. "Daddy." A small voice broke the silence. His daughter Emma, only 7 years old, had stirred awake. Her sleepy eyes blinked as she leaned forward from her car seat, resting her chin on the backrest. "Why aren't we home yet?" Daniel smiled faintly in the rearview mirror. "Almost there, sweetheart. Just a few more minutes." As he turned the corner near a dimly lit cafe, Emma's little gasp made him slow down. "Daddy, look." Daniel followed her gaze. On the wooden bench outside the closed cafe, a figure was curled up tightly, trying to stay warm in the night chill. It was a young woman. Her clothes, though clean, looked worn, and her thin jacket was hardly enough to fight the cold air. Strands of her hair slipped across her pale face as she rested against the back of the bench. Her arms wrapped around herself. Even from a distance, Daniel could see the exhaustion etched into her features. The kind that wasn't just from one sleepless night, but from weeks, maybe months of struggle. Emma's wide, innocent eyes stayed fixed on the woman. Then she asked, in the pure, unfiltered way only a child could, "Daddy, why is she sleeping here?" The question landed heavier than Daniel expected. For a man used to boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, there were very few things in the world that could leave him speechless. But this pierced straight through his chest. He didn't have an answer for her. Not one that a child could, or should understand. "She must be very tired," Daniel finally murmured, his voice quieter than he intended. But Emma wasn't satisfied. "Tired people sleep in beds, Daddy," she replied softly, her small brow furrowing with concern. "Not outside in the cold." Daniel parked the car at the curb, his mind torn. He knew the dangers of approaching strangers. Knew the world was complicated and sometimes cruel. But he also saw the way his daughter's eyes glistened with worry. The way her small hands clutched her blanket as if ready to share it. He couldn't just drive away. Not this time. He sat for a moment longer, watching the young woman on the bench. She stirred slightly in her sleep, pulling her thin jacket tighter around her body, as if the gesture alone could shield her from the night. There was something heartbreakingly fragile about her, yet also resilient, like a flower that had somehow pushed through cracked pavement, surviving against all odds. "Stay in the car, Emma," Daniel said gently, placing a reassuring hand on his daughter's shoulder. "I'm just going to check if she's okay." Emma nodded but leaned against the window, unwilling to take her eyes off the sleeping figure. "Be nice to her, Daddy," she whispered, almost as if she knew he might hesitate. Daniel stepped out of the car. The cool night air wrapped around him, and for a moment, the sharp contrast between his expensive tailored suit and her threadbare clothes hit him like a wave of guilt. He wasn't a man who often thought about privilege. He had earned everything he had with years of relentless work. But standing there, watching her shiver in her sleep, he couldn't ignore how unfair the world could be. He walked closer, his footsteps soft on the pavement. He didn't want to startle her, but when his shadow fell across her, she shifted and stirred awake. Her eyes fluttered open, wide and frightened at first. Then narrowing with wary confusion. Sorry," she stammered quickly, sitting up straighter. Her voice was hoarse but gentle. "I wasn't bothering anyone, was I? I'll go. I promise." Daniel raised a hand lightly. "No, you don't have to leave. I just wanted to make sure you're all right." The young woman lowered her gaze, her hands nervously twisting together. Up close, Daniel could see how young she truly was, early 20s perhaps. Her cheeks were flushed pink from the cold, and dark circles shadowed her eyes. Yet there was a quiet dignity in the way she tried to compose herself. As if even here, on a bench in the middle of the night, she refused to let the world strip her of her pride. I'm fine, she said softly. Really? Just resting a little. But Daniel knew that wasn't the truth. Behind him, Emma pressed her little palm against the car window, watching them closely. Her father's sharp instincts as a businessman told him that this moment was no coincidence. Fate had led them here. And perhaps his daughter's innocent heart saw something he had long forgotten to look for. The silence stretched, filled only by the distant hum of the city. And for the first time in years, Daniel Morgan, a man who had everything, felt utterly unprepared for what came next. The young woman's words, just resting a little, hung in the night air, but Daniel could hear the tremor in her voice. The kind of tremor that didn't come from cold alone. She shifted on the bench, as though ready to stand and leave, but her body betrayed her. When she tried to rise, her knees wobbled, and she sank back down with a faint, embarrassed laugh. "Guess I'm more tired than I thought," she muttered, pulling her thin jacket tighter around herself. From the car, Emma's small voice rang out. "Daddy, can I talk to her?" Daniel turned. Hesitating, but the eager look in his daughter's eyes melted his resolve. With a faint sigh, he opened the back door, and Emma scampered out, dragging her blanket with her. She marched over to the bench with all the seriousness a 7-year-old could muster. The young woman blinked in surprise as Emma carefully draped the soft, pink blanket over her lap. "Here," Emma said simply. "You look cold." The woman's eyes widened, and for the first time, Daniel saw a spark break through her exhaustion. A shimmer of emotion she quickly tried to hide. She touched the blanket as if it were something precious, something she hadn't felt in a long time. "Oh, sweetheart, thank you. But this is yours. You'll get cold." Emma shook her head firmly, her curls bouncing. "Daddy will keep me warm." "You need it more." Daniel's throat tightened. His daughter's kindness always humbled him, but seeing it directed toward this stranger struck something deeper. He crouched beside Emma, resting a steadying hand on her shoulder, then looked at the young woman. "What's your name?" he asked gently. The woman hesitated, as if even her name was something she wasn't sure she should give away. Finally, she whispered, "Leela." "Leela," Daniel repeated, his voice warm. "I'm Daniel, and this is my daughter, Emma." Emma smiled brightly. "Hi Lila. Why are you sleeping here? Don't you have a house?" The innocence of the question made Leela's face flush with both shame and sorrow. She glanced down, her fingers twisting the edge of the blanket. I used to. But things got hard. I lost my job a few months ago. Without it, I couldn't pay rent, and when my savings ran out," her voice cracked, and she pressed her lips together, trying to stop the tears threatening to spill. "This bench is the safest place I could find tonight." Daniel felt a heaviness settle in his chest. He had heard countless stories of hardship from employees, from charities he donated to. But hearing it here, directly from the lips of a young woman trembling on a cold bench, was different. It was raw, it was real. Emma reached out and took Leela's hand with her small fingers, completely unafraid. "That's not fair," she whispered. "You're nice. Nice people should have beds." Leela let out a choked laugh, though tears glimmered in her eyes. "You're very sweet. I'll be okay, I promise. I just need to figure things out." Daniel studied her closely. She wasn't begging. She wasn't asking for money. She was trying, even in her most vulnerable state, to hold on to her dignity. That struck him harder than anything else. "Have you eaten?" he asked. Suddenly Leela blinked him, caught off guard. "What? Food?" Daniel clarified. "When was the last time you had a meal?" Her silence was answer enough. She lowered her gaze, ashamed. Emma's little stomach grumbled right on cue, breaking the tension. "Daddy, we have food at home," she said eagerly. "We can share, can we please? She's hungry, and cold, and," she leaned closer to Leela, whispering loudly, "I like her." Leela's laugh was shaky but genuine this time. "You're too kind, Emma." Daniel stood, running a hand through his hair as he wrestled with the decision forming in his mind. He had always believed in boundaries, in keeping his daughters safe and their world orderly. But standing here, hearing his daughter's pleas, and watching Leela try to hold herself together, those walls he'd built around his life began to crack. Still, his cautious side spoke up. "Leela," he said softly, "do you have family you can call? Anyone who can help you tonight?" Her shoulders sagged. "No, it's just me. Silence again. The only sound was the faint hum of a distant car and the soft rustle of Emma's blanket as Leela clutched it. Daniel exhaled slowly. He looked at Emma. His daughter's pleading eyes. Her certainty that helping was the right thing to do. And he realized he couldn't just walk away. Not without losing something in himself. "All right," he murmured finally. "Let's get you something warm to eat." Leela's head snapped up, startled. "No, I can't. I don't want to be a burden." But Emma interrupted, her voice clear and insistent. "You're not a burden. You're my friend now." And with that, the walls Daniel had so carefully built around his life and heart began to crumble. The moment Emma declared, "You're my friend now," the night seemed to grow quieter. As though the city itself was listening. Leela stared at the little girl in disbelief, her lips parted but no words coming out. No one had called her a friend in weeks, maybe months. People had passed her on sidewalks, glanced at her in doorways, looked through her as if she didn't exist. And now here was a child, pure, innocent, claiming her without hesitation. Daniel felt something shift inside him. He had always prided himself on being practical, on calculating risks and weighing choices with a businessman's precision. Yet tonight, logic seemed so small compared to the look in his daughter's eyes. Leela shook her head quickly, pulling the blanket closer as though she feared it would be taken away. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "I'll be fine. I just need to get through tonight." But even as she spoke, her voice betrayed her. She wasn't fine. She was exhausted, hungry, and alone. Daniel crouched down so his gaze met hers directly. His voice softened, losing the authority he used in boardrooms. "Leela, my daughter is right. You shouldn't be out here. It's too cold. Let us help you, just for tonight. No strings attached." Her eyes flicked between him and Emma. Suspicion and pride warring against desperation. "I don't want pity," she admitted, her voice trembling. "It's not pity," Daniel replied firmly. "It's kindness. And sometimes, we all need a little of that." Emma tugged at his sleeve impatiently. "Daddy, stop talking so much. Let's just take her home." She stomped her little boot against the pavement as if the decision was obvious. Something only adults made complicated. Leela laughed despite herself, a soft, disbelieving sound. "You have a very persuasive daughter. She gets that from her mother," Daniel murmured before he could stop himself. His chest tightened at the thought, but he pushed it aside. Tonight wasn't about the past. It was about this moment. Leela's smile faded, her shoulders curling inward. "I really don't want to be a problem for you." Emma stepped closer, and wrapped her tiny arms around Leela's waist, hugging her with the fearless affection only children had. "You're not a problem. You're my friend," she repeated firmly. Leela froze, overwhelmed by the warmth of the gesture. She looked up at Daniel, her eyes shimmering with tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed in public. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "Why stop for someone like me?" Daniel hesitated, but the answer came as he looked at Emma, her little arms still clinging to Leela. "Because my daughter asked the one question I couldn't answer," he admitted. "She asked why you're sleeping here. And I realized, I can't give her a world where that's okay." The words broke something inside Leela. She pressed her lips together, trying to stay composed, but a tear slid down her cheek anyway. She wiped it quickly, embarrassed. "I don't even know what to say. Just say yes," Emma chirped, looking up at her with wide, hopeful eyes. For a long moment, Leela sat frozen, torn between her pride and her longing for safety. Then, with a trembling exhale, she nodded. "All right. Just for tonight." Emma squealed with delight and immediately grabbed her hand. "Come on. We have hot chocolate at home. And marshmallows." Daniel rose to his feet, a faint smile tugging at his lips despite the heaviness in his chest. He extended his hand to Leela, helping her up from the bench. She hesitated before taking it, her grip light, uncertain. He noticed how cold her fingers were, how fragile her hand felt in his. A strange protectiveness washed over him, stronger than he expected. As they walked back toward the car, Daniel opened the rear door for her. Emma scooted over eagerly, patting the seat beside her. "Sit here. You can have my blanket." Leela slipped inside, the warmth of the car enveloping her instantly. She pulled the blanket tighter, her eyes darting nervously around the luxurious interior. "This is more than I imagined," she murmured under her breath. Daniel slid into the driver's seat, starting the engine. He caught her words but chose not to comment. Instead, he glanced in the mirror. Watching as Emma leaned her head against Leela's shoulder with the innocent trust only a child could give. For the first time in a long while, Daniel didn't feel like a millionaire making a decision. He felt like a father, a man trying to do what was right. And though none of them knew it yet, this simple choice, to stop, to listen, to invite, was about to change all of their lives forever. The drive home was quiet at first, the hum of the engine filling the silence. Leela sat stiffly in the back seat, her hands gripping Emma's blanket, as if it were the only anchor she had. She kept stealing glances out the window, her reflection ghostly in the glass, the city lights flickering across her face. Beside her, Emma leaned against her shoulder, chattering about everything from her favorite bedtime story, to how she had once baked cookies with too much sugar. Leela responded with soft nods and little smiles, though her eyes remained uncertain. As if she still couldn't believe this was happening. Daniel, meanwhile, kept his gaze on the road, though his thoughts were restless. It had been years since anyone new sat in his car. Years since he let anyone into his personal space beyond business associates or family. And now, here was this stranger, fragile yet dignified. Sitting in the back seat with his daughter, as if she belonged there. He wasn't sure what this meant. But for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel alone on the drive home. When they finally turned into the long driveway, Leela's breath caught. The iron gates opened silently, and beyond them stretched a path lined with tall oaks, leading to a mansion that looked like on the cover of an architectural magazine. Its grand pillars glowed under the soft exterior lights, windows glittering warmly against the dark sky. Leela's eyes widened. "This is your home," she whispered, unable to hide the disbelief in her voice. Emma beamed proudly. "Yep, Daddy says it's too big, but I like it because I can play hide and seek forever." Leela swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around the blanket. She suddenly felt small, out of place, like a shadow stepping into a world of light. The warmth of the car no longer comforted her, instead, it made her hyper-aware of the worn state of her clothes, the exhaustion etched on her face. She didn't belong here. As the car came to a stop, Daniel glanced back at her. "It's just a house, Leela," he said softly. Almost as if reading her thoughts. "What matters is what happens inside." She gave him a faint smile, though her stomach twisted with nerves. Emma was the first out of the car, tugging at Leela's hand eagerly. "Come on. I'll show you your room." "Room?" Leela repeated, startled. Emma said matter-of-factly, leading her toward the front steps. "You can't sleep on a bench anymore. Daddy said so." Leela hesitated at the doorway, staring up at the grand entrance. The polished wooden doors towered above her, intimidating and beautiful. For a moment, she thought about running. It would be easier to slip away now before she got used to the warmth, before she remembered what it felt like to be cared for. But Emma's small hand clutched hers tightly, pulling her forward. Inside, the house glowed with soft golden light. The foyer stretched upward with a sweeping staircase, the marble floor gleaming beneath their feet. A chandelier sparkled above, casting prisms of light that danced across the walls. Leela stopped, overwhelmed, her breath catching in her throat. I shouldn't be here," she murmured under her breath. But Emma squeezed her hand. "Yes, you should. You're my friend. Friends come inside." Daniel closed the door gently behind them, his eyes watching her carefully. He could see her hesitation. The way her shoulders hunched slightly as if she expected to be scolded for stepping on the marble. He spoke quietly, steadying. "Leela, you're welcome here. No one's going to turn you away." The words carried a weight that made her chest ache. For weeks, maybe longer, she had lived expecting rejection at every corner. To hear acceptance, without condition, was almost too much. Emma tugged her toward the stairs. "Come on, I want to show you the room near mine." Leela followed reluctantly, her heart pounding. Upstairs, Emma flung open a door to a guest room. The walls were painted a calming cream, the bed draped in soft linens, pillows piled high like clouds. A small lamp glowed warmly on the nightstand, casting a gentle halo over the room. "This one's perfect," Emma announced proudly. "It's right next to mine. If you get scared at night, you can knock on my wall." Leela stepped inside slowly, her fingertips brushing the smooth blanket on the bed. She hadn't felt sheets this soft in months. The air smelled faintly of lavender, clean and fresh. Her throat tightened. "This is too much," she whispered. "No, it's just right," Emma said firmly, then plopped onto the bed and patted the spot beside her. "See. Comfy." Daniel appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable but gentle. "Dinner will be ready in a few minutes. You should eat something warm." Leela looked at him, then at Emma who was grinning from ear to ear. Her resistance began to crumble. Slowly, she sat on the edge of the bed, sinking into its comfort. She closed her eyes briefly, and for the first time in a long time, her body relaxed. Later, at dinner, the tension eased even more. Emma chattered nonstop, telling Leela about school. About her favorite toys, about the time she convinced her dad to let her paint his office pink, a story Daniel confirmed with a quiet chuckle. Leela laughed more than she expected. Her guarded walls slipping away little by little. Daniel noticed it all. The way her eyes softened when Emma spoke, the way her laughter filled the dining room like music. The way she listened intently as if every word mattered. And for the first time in years, he felt something stir in the quiet corners of his heart. A warmth he hadn't let himself feel since his wife passed. He glanced at Emma, glowing with joy, and then at Leela, who seemed to fit into the picture without even trying. And he realized something he hadn't allowed himself to think for a very long time: this house, though filled with everything money could buy, had been missing something all along. And tonight, for the first time, it felt complete. The first rays of dawn crept through the mansion's tall windows, painting the cream walls with soft gold. Birds sang faintly in the distance, and the air carried the stillness that only early morning could bring. Leela sat on the edge of the guest bed, her borrowed nightshirt neatly folded beside her. She hadn't slept much, though the bed was soft and the blanket impossibly warm. For hours, she had lain awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Emma's steady breathing from the room next door. Every comfort she felt here only reminded her of what she didn't deserve. She whispered to herself, as if to summon courage, "I can't stay. I shouldn't stay." Her fingers brushed the blanket one last time before she rose. Carefully she gathered her few belongings. A worn purse with nothing inside but a notebook, a pen, and a photo of her late mother. She tucked the pink blanket Emma had given her on the bench neatly at the foot of the bed. It still held the little girl's warmth, but she couldn't take it with her. That wouldn't be right. Quietly, she tiptoed to the door, every step heavy with guilt and longing. She paused at the threshold, glancing back at the room bathed in sunlight. For one fleeting moment, she let herself imagine belonging here, waking to warmth instead of cold, to laughter instead of silence. But she shook her head firmly. That wasn't her life. Downstairs, the kitchen light was already on. The smell of fresh coffee and toast drifted through the hall, surprising her. Daniel was there, dressed casually in a crisp shirt with the sleeves rolled up, his dark hair slightly tousled. He looked up from the counter where he was pouring coffee into a mug. "You're up early," he said softly. Leela froze, clutching her bag tighter. "I was just leaving." Daniel set the mug down, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. He leaned against the counter, studying her with those steady eyes that saw more than she wanted. "Without breakfast." "I've already taken too much," she replied quickly. Her voice trembled, but she forced it steady. "The bed, the food, the kindness. I don't want to overstay." Before Daniel could answer, a pair of small feet pattered down the stairs. Emma burst into the kitchen, her curls bouncing wildly, her favorite stuffed bunny tucked under one arm. She spotted Leela instantly and ran forward, wrapping her little arms around her waist. "You're not leaving, are you?" Emma's voice was muffled against Leela's coat. Leela's heart cracked. She bent down, hugging the child tightly, inhaling the faint scent of lavender shampoo in her hair. "Sweetheart, I have to. This isn't my home." Emma pulled back, her eyes wide and shimmering with tears. "But it can be. Please stay, Leela, please." Leela's throat closed. She looked at Daniel helplessly, her eyes pleading for him to say something that would make it easier. He stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Emma's right. You don't have to go." Leila shook her head quickly, panic flashing in her eyes. "Daniel, I can't, I don't belong here. You've already done more than anyone has in months. I won't take advantage of it. You're not taking advantage. He said steadily, each word deliberate. You needed help. We gave it. That's not charity, it's humanity. Leela looked down, her fingers twisting the strap of her bag. She hated how much she wanted to believe him. How desperately her heart yearned to stay. Emma tugged her hand again, stubborn and determined. Daddy, tell her she has to stay. She can't leave. Daniel crouched beside his daughter. Meeting both of their eyes at once. His voice was softer now, but filled with conviction. Leela, I can't force you. But if you walk out that door, you'll be stepping back into cold, into hunger. Into a world that's been cruel. And if you stay, he paused, his gaze flickering briefly to Lima, then back to Leela. You'll be safe. You'll have a chance to start again. Her lips trembled. Start again. How? Daniel stood, crossing the room to a drawer where he pulled out a folder. He slid it on the counter and slid it toward her. I own several companies, and one of them is hiring. Office work. Nothing glamorous. But steady pay, good benefits. That position is yours if you want it. Lila stared at a folder as if it were a foreign object. Why would you do this for me? He hesitated, then answered with quiet honesty. Because last night, when Emma asked me why you were sleeping outside, I realized I couldn't explain it to her. Not if I had the power to change it. Silence stretched between them, broken only by Emma's sniffles as she clung tighter to Leela. Tears welled in Leela's eyes. She had expected rejection at every turn, but here was a man offering her not just shelter, but dignity. A chance. A future. Her knees buckled slightly, and she sank into the nearest chair, covering her face with her hands. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to cry freely. Not out of despair, but out of the overwhelming relief of being seen, of being given a second chance. Emma climbed onto her lap, hugging her tightly. Don't cry, Leela. You're home now. Daniel watched the scene quietly. His chest tightening. He hadn't planned this, hadn't planned for a stranger to walk into their lives and shift the air around them. But as he looked at Leela holding his daughter, he realized something undeniable. This house had been missing more than just a mother's touch. It had been missing warmth, connection, family. And maybe, just maybe, fate had sent Leela to their doorstep for that very reason. The morning light streamed brighter through the windows, spilling across the kitchen table where 3 lives now intersected. 1 man, 1 child, and 1 young woman who thought she had nothing left. Together, they had the beginning of something new. Something more.